This presentation will explore secondary function. Diatonic function deals with things that have 1 as the home of the key signature. That would be considered the tonic triad. And everything in that key would be diatonic, meaning that all of the chords fit into the key signature of that home chord, and they function in the key of the home chord. Okay, and that would be their primary function, to function in that key. And the function is basically either leading away from or back to the home chord or back to 1. And we use the circle of fifths progressions to do that, mostly using 5 as our dominant chord, or sometimes 7 diminished that really pull back to 1. But what if we wanted to set up a temporary home away from home? We wanted to set up a temporary tonal center that was not 1. How would we go about doing that? For instance, what if we were in a major key, but we wanted to temporarily make the relative minor sound like home? Well, in C major, our favorite example, we know 1 is the C major chord, and these are all the diatonic chords because they all fit into the key signature. And we know that 6 is the relative minor. But how would we go about making 6 feel like home instead of 1? Just temporarily. That's where we get in a secondary function. To do that, again, 5 and 7 lead back to 1, so we can't use those chords. We want to use a dominant chord that would lead to 6. What would that be? Well, that would be harmony not in the key signature, so no longer diatonic. It would function in the temporary tonal center, or function in 6. So we're looking for the 5 chord in 6, or A minor. Alright, so let's look at our circle of fifths really quick. Here we see C major and A minor, our relative major and minor chords. Well, the dominant chord in C major is G, C, D, E, F, G. That's our 5 chord. Okay. The same is true with A minor. The 5 chord in A minor would be an E chord. However, we can't just use E minor. That's already diatonic in C major. Besides, in the minor key, we want to use the harmonic version. So we'd be looking for an E major triad or an E dominant 7th chord, right? So again, we're looking at 6. The 5 of that would be an E chord, but not minor. It needs to be altered, and that's a good thing because that's going to pull us to the 6. So we're going to raise that G to a G sharp to get an E major triad. Okay. So now we have an accidental. We are no longer diatonic to C major. It doesn't fit in there, so we're not even thinking about C anymore. Okay, it's no longer primary functioning for C major. It's functioning to the secondary home, which is the A minor. So we can't call it a 3 chord, minor or major. We couldn't. It's not functioning as a 3. What is it functioning as? It's functioning as the dominant chord in A minor. So we're going to call it just that. We're going to call it the 5 of A minor or 5 of 6. Okay, and that's what we would write there. So here's C major chord. Here's an A minor chord. Okay. Here's an E minor chord. E major to A minor. Okay. Let's plug this into a chord progression to get a little bit more detailed here. C major. We've got C, E, G. That's a 1 chord. Next we have E, G, C. It's a 1 chord in first inversion. Then we take that C and we lower it to a B, and that gives us our 3 chord, E, G, B. Then we raise the G sharp, making it a 5 chord, leading to this 6 chord. So here's what that progression sounds like. So notice that E major chord really pulls us to the new tonal center, the temporary tonal center of 6 there, or A minor. Okay. Again, once you have an accidental, no longer diatonic function, it's secondary function because it's leading to a secondary home or an alternate home. How do you identify secondary function if you're analyzing music? Well, as soon as you see an accidental, you need to think differently. Think outside the diatonic function box because it's no longer diatonic, it's no longer in the original key signature. So, how do we do that? Glad you asked. There's an easy process to follow. First of all, when you see an accidental, skip the chord that the accidental is in. Just walk away from it. Skip over it, don't pay attention to it in the least. 2, you're going to analyze the chord after the accidental chord based on the diatonic function of the original key. Okay? And that is going to give you the destination of the accidental chord and also give you the denominator or the bottom number of your fraction. Then, once you know what your destination is, you can go back and analyze the chord that has the accidental based on the chord the key of the destination chord. And that's going to give you the top number. And it's almost always going to be 5. Occasionally it'll be a 7, diminished chord. So here we have an example. We're in the key of F major, and we see that there's one chord with an accidental. So we start off on our 1 chord, F, A, C. Next we have a B flat D, F. It's an inverted chord. That's actually a 4 chord in second inversion. Okay. Then we have our accidental chord. We're not even going to look at it. We're going to skip over that. Okay, and we're going to see where our destination is. So we look at that last one. We've got C, E, and G. It's another inverted chord. In the key of F major, C, E, G is the 5 chord. So we've got another second inversion chord there. Okay. Now we also know that that's our destination, so we're going to make that the denominator there. This chord is going to be something of 5. Okay. Now we're no longer thinking in F major. We're going to think in C major because we are thinking in the key that is the 5 chord. So in the key of C major, G, B, D is the dominant chord, the 5 chord. So that gives us our top number. This is a 5 of 5. This is what it sounds like. Excuse me, let me start over. Okay, so that G major pulls us temporarily to C major as our new tonal center. Okay, it's definitely not ever considered a major 2 chord because it's not diatonic. If I see that on the test, I'm giving you a 0 on the whole test. I don't care. It's not that. It's a secondary function because there's an accidental. Very important you see that. Okay? So again, it's easy to recognize when you're doing this process. You look, if you see an accidental, then you're going to have to follow the secondary function process. And again, the purpose of this is to set up a temporary tonal center. Now, in a 4-chord progression or a 5-chord progression like the ones we've been looking at, it's not a game changer. But in a symphony, you might want to set up a whole section that's in a different key, and you would do that with a secondary function.